Disclaimer. To the Pharisees and Karens out there.
How dare you!
All guests on this show do not reflect the opinions of the host. The purpose of this show is to have interesting conversations, stretch our minds, and grow.
Not what we want!
If you are looking for an echo chamber, viewer and listener discretion
is advised.
You talk about extreme.
What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up.
All things continually lead back to serpents, dragons, fairies, Nephilim, and fallen angels.
In the distance looms a mystical mountain.
As Mike Heiser used to say, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important.
At its peak, a great fire burns, concealing the Prometheus Lens.
This development of this knowledge that's being talked about within the mystery schools.
An ancient artifact said to reveal the hidden truth within a deliberately darkened world.
There's a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world.
Join us as we travel and explore the vast unknown. It's a hero's journey with dragons to slay, damsels to save, and innumerable treasures to hoard. Torches high.
The Smithsonian, they caught wind of a giant skeleton. They would send their agents out to get it.
But it takes courage to move forward, to move out of the shadows, out of the unreality that we think of as reality.
We are all on the hero's journey.
Mankind has been in contact with and influenced by extraterrestrials.
Leave the Sitchin mound of bull feathers out of it.
You know, look at it from a different perspective.
Hey, what is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because I'm about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens Podcast, the place where the conversations are always enlightening. I'm your host, Justin, and here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus Lens to take a second look at everything. Hey guys, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the hero's journey. Hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. Down below, we'll have our socials. Be sure to check us out on our various platforms, and that would be much, much appreciated. Well, today I got a conversation for you guys that I think you're going to enjoy. Hopefully some people will get some enlightenment, pun intended there, out of this one. And this woman, I met her through some back channels and through some communities that I'm a part of on Facebook. And we just started talking, and we had some similar interests in astrology and astronomy and seeing that kind of stuff in the Bible. And we've been talking back and forth, and she actually has some amazing stories and testimonies, and I've been working on her for a few weeks now, and she's finally cleared up her schedule and come to hang out with us and talk to us. But I'd like to welcome to the show Lindsay. Lindsay, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, just for those that don't know you, just give us a little background and how you got here and what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I am an ex-New Ager, and I was born and raised Christian, but slowly slipped away, and for about 13 years was heavily into the New Age. And recently, a little over a year ago, got the call back to Jesus, like very strongly. And someone shared one of these podcasts. The first one I think I listened to was Blurry Creatures, and then I've been subjected to others, including yours. And I was just very drawn to the supernatural side of the Bible. It answered a lot of questions for me. And that's how I'm here today. So,
well, I did actually got to listen to that one talk that you did with the Blurry Creatures. And I think that was just a really fascinating testimony. And I remember when I talked to you about it, you were like, oh, I was so nervous and I don't think I got out what I wanted to get out. So it's like, I want you to just be chill and relax here and take your time and we got all night to get out your story, because just from what we've talked about, you've got some really good ones.
Great. Yeah. And it's interesting that I'm even here telling my story, because in one aspect, I feel like it's not that interesting. On the other side, I feel like it was so rare, I was embarrassed to talk about it. People, I know you've talked to a lot of people who've been through similar things. It's this weird juxtaposition of being embarrassed, and then, and just, I don't feel like I'm an expert in Christianity. I don't feel like I'm an expert in ETs, but I have had these crazy experiences probably my whole life, leading up to the big one that happened in, I believe it was February of 2018. So maybe.
Well, if you want to walk us through kind of like, how did you first get into the New Age, and how did that come about, and kind of walk us, through your journey through that New Age movement.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, what my first introduction to it was. And I think since I was really little and I learned to read, I devoured books of all kinds. My parents were super strict, so I read a lot. And my grandparents had a really big library. They had those old encyclopedias, and I used to go through those, but they had one astrology book. It was the Linda Goodman's sun signs, and I devoured that. And so from a very young age, I was very into astrology. And my stepmother had a little bit of a esoteric stint to her. Like, she would pay for these numerology reports for me, like as a gift. And at some point, I got into, I'm 43, I was born in 81, and the movie The Craft made a big impact in my life. And so at one point, so at one point, I definitely had Wiccan books, and I did the Ouija boards, and tried to call ghosts as games, like little, and it was all like fun and games. But looking back, obviously it wasn't. And I was always drawn towards books that really emphasized characters that were like really good and really evil. And I had, from a very young age, I had a lot of, I'm forgetting, what's the word where you're dreaming and you can control your lucid dreams.
Yeah, lucid, yeah.
I had very young, this is kind of all tied to the story, and I don't really know how, but I remember when I was 5, because I was living in a very specific house, I used to have these reoccurring dreams where every time I was like nodding off to dreamland, I would have to travel through the stars, and then I would land in the dream, and the dream would happen, and I would know I was dreaming. I didn't know how to get back necessarily, but I could control things in the dream to some extent. And I would hear my stepmom calling me that it was time to wake up in the morning, and I would have to fly through the stars back, and then I would wake up. And it happened so much that I thought it was normal. And it just stopped happening when I was a little older. But I had this one reoccurring dream that I would wake up after I flew through the stars and be in my bedroom surrounded by my stuffed animals. And I had like 30 stuffed animals in real life and in the dream. And they were all evil in the dream, and they would all be talking to each other. And when I first started having the dream, I would just kind of stay still and listen to them and be scared to death until I woke up. And slowly I realized they were afraid of the light, and they were so afraid of me turning the light on. And so over a period of many, many dreams, I got them to trust me. And then when they finally trusted me, I like threw on the light, and they were all still, and I never had that dream again. So with like adult eyes and having ET experiences now, I wonder if it had to do with that, and my child mind made them into stuffed animals. So anyway, that's just some background of my childhood. But sorry. But I'm also was raised Christian on top of this. So I was Catholic. My father and stepmother raised me Catholic, and my mother and stepfather were non-denominational, born-again Christian. So I spent my time in those two very different churches and very much believing in God, and having a really strong relationship with God on top of all these things I was dabbling with from a young age. So,
yeah. So, like when you was doing that sort of stuff, so was this just something like you were doing on your own? Because I know you said some of the books were around and you found them fascinating. Was this just some like self-exploration with, just within yourself, or did you have like a friend group like at school? I necessarily wouldn't call it a coven, but like, like-minded people that you explored these topics and stuff with, or was this just something you did on your own?
I did. Looking back, I feel like I was the one who roped my friends into it. I just had this interest in that world, which, after listening to so many podcasts on these issues, I do wonder if it's in our DNA and passed down through families. Because I recently had a talk with my mother, and she has had a lot of things, supernatural things happen to her. Although I don't really feel like she dabbled as much as I did. But then, going back, my cousin did a lot of research through our DNA lines. And, there was definitely a couple, 2 to be exact, accused witches in our family line. And whether, they were just as like women that were supporting themselves financially and accused of being a witch, or actually witches, I don't know. But I find all of it very interesting, just because I was so young when I started having those dreams. And that was before I kind of dabbled in the esoteric things. But to answer your question, in middle school and high school, when I was interested in Wiccan, I was spending a lot of time by myself because my parents, I had tons of friends at school, but I wasn't allowed to do a lot of outside of school things. So mostly by myself. And then I did rope some friends into doing or trying out some things. But, I was really into colors and how, you could burn candles to get wishes to come true and things like that. So, but I kind of went away from it. I grew out of it, I guess.
And so when did that transition into, I guess, what you would label as New Age? Like when did you start doing the meditation and the crystals and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it happened slowly. I guess I dropped out of high school at 17. I was a really good student, but I really didn't want to live under my parents' roof anymore. So I just left school. I had an older boyfriend and I moved in with him. And we traveled a lot for years out of the country. And then he, long story short, he wasn't a U.S. citizen. He was Brazilian and he couldn't renew his visa. And so I had to decide whether to get married at a very young age and live in Brazil or break up. And we decided to break up. And I went and lived on a farm with a bunch of hippies. And I got really into the agricultural side, but they also were very into esoteric stuff. And it just slowly happened, right? I slowly started getting more into astrology. I slowly started doing more yoga, mindfulness meditation. For me, it was about health and balance. Eventually, I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I went to school for holistic psychology, which is the same as regular psychology, except all your electives are alternative medicine, which lots of yoga, lots of meditation, I was very into mindfulness meditation. I actually wanted to go get my PhD in mindfulness meditation. It's all, I still don't know, like, I don't feel like meditation is necessarily bad, but I think if you don't have the faith behind it, and you don't know who you're clearing your mind for, it's just such a fine line. Looking back,
that's what prayer is. I mean, prayer is a type of meditation, but I can't remember who it was, but somebody was talking about that, and they were saying basically like your body is a vessel, and when you're doing that stuff, you are emptying your vessel, but you are emptying it and welcoming it to be filled. So if you're not, under the umbrella of the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ, you're inviting some of this dark stuff to fill your cup. And as Christians, we're offering that empty vessel to Christ and the Holy Spirit.
100%. Yeah. But it doesn't feel like that at the time, or it didn't to me. And then, forget the yoga too. So I have to be honest. It's so funny to hear all these words coming out of my mouth because I've been surrounded by Christians my whole life. I've stuck up for Christians when people say Christians are so close-minded, and because my people I love have always been Christian, my parents and extended family. But when people said things like yoga was evil to me, I thought they were insane. Like I just, But when things happen to you, and I feel like God just kind of wakes you up, you can't not see all the connections and all. You're literally yoking yourself to deities or spirits or entities, whatever you want to call them, as you're doing yoga. It's wild. But so I think I was doing all of that without knowing, right? And then on top of it, I got really into the feminist movement in the way that, I felt really driven to make a lot of money and also not to settle down. And I had many partners and I drank a lot. I was partying. I was living in the Boston area, and all my friends partied all the time. I don't know. It was just the norm. It's you go wild before you settle down. And I think, in hindsight with that too, I was opening myself up to a lot of things, just having multiple partners and, so it slowly progressed. I ended up getting married, and I actually had a very pagan ceremony. God wasn't mentioned, it was worshiping the earth kind of thing. And I just progressively went down the pagan route. You probably noticed being a witch is very trendy now. I was kind of at the forefront of that, but it's interesting because I never felt comfortable calling myself a witch. The circles I ran with.
You didn't find that appealing?
No, I was and honestly, it's interesting that I found out, 2 of my ancestors were killed for being witches, which I didn't know until after, but it didn't feel appealing, and it didn't feel empowering. I was that's a very negative word for a very, very negative thing that exists. And with all the dabbling I did, some reason innately, I never purposely did anything evil to hurt anyone or anything. And I never did any love spells. I really believed in free will, and there was a line that I just never would cross with the things that I did. So here I am, very into the pagan world, which goes hand in hand with my profession. I'm a professional herbalist now, which there is a Christian guild of herbalism. I think it's funny. I heard in one of the groups I'm in, or someone posted that, working with herbs is making potions. And it really made me think about it. And I came to the conclusion that it's really about your intention, because God gifted us this medicine that's all around us.
Hi everybody, I'm Chris Vick. I'm the founder of Squatch Survival Gear, and today I'm here to talk to you about some of our most popular packs. In 2017, I founded Squatch Survival Gear because I was tired of seeing low-quality, mass-produced packs flooding the American market. I decided I'd make a pack that was 100% designed and manufactured in the United States, and today I'm here to talk to you about some of our most popular packs. This is the Night Howler. It was designed for EDC and travelers. As you can see, it's small. It's roughly 10 by 12 inches. It's designed for everyday carry. The pass-through pad allows you to put it on your luggage when you travel. This is the Rougarou. It's very civilianized, lots of attachment points. This is a 25-liter pack. We designed it for a little lighter load. If you need more than the Night Howler, you should try this. This is the Mothman, very similar to the Rougarou, roughly the same size, but it's designed for carrying a much heavier load. The removable waist belt will help you carry that extra load. You've also got your retaining strap if you're going to take that on a travel trip. This is the Kakamora. This would be your first 72-hour pack, as we used to say in the Army. It comes with an internal frame, totally adjustable straps, heavily padded. You can carry heavy loads, carry lots of gear. This is the Rock Ape. It's a 45-liter pack. Same internal frame, same great padded straps that you like, with a few extra features. If you're wondering what's with all the crazy names, well, that's because finding 100% American made is as hard as finding Bigfoot in the woods. When you're ready to carry our packs, contact us at squatchsurvivalgear.com or any of our social medias.
Hey guys, what's going on? Hey, I just got a call to action for you. If you're enjoying this episode at all, you're getting anything from it, please take the time to click that like button, click that share button, and share us with your friends and your family on social media. Those are great things that help us to grow the show and increase our listenership. And also, while you're here and I have your attention, flip over from the chat, go to the comment section. Just drop me a quick comment. Let me know where you're from, what you think of the episode. All these things help the algorithm and help the show. And if you're not on YouTube and you're listening on your favorite platform, please, if you've not done so already, give us a 5-star review. All of these things are great ways that you can contribute to the show that you love and listen to every single week. Thank you guys for all the love and support. Back to the episode.
Anyway, I'm jumping all over. I do this.
No, you're staying on.
Okay.
And that, you got to think too, because back during the Salem witch trials, just someone like you, even if you wasn't into the New Age, if you were just a well-studied woman that knew the herbs and knew the remedies and the cause and effects, and was making tinctures and things like that, all it takes is one pissed off man or one really super paranoid woman to run their mouth to the right people, and then you could be burned at the stake for just basically being what we would call a doctor today and be labeled a witch.
100%. And, I did a little research on that, and a lot of the women that were accused of being witches happened to be able to financially support themselves. So they were herbalists. People came to them to buy medicine, and they were birth workers and death workers, which is how the witches got their, because they're working with birth and death and magic potions. But yeah, it's very interesting. That's a whole nother, you can turn down that road and talk about it for hours. But yeah, so that's kind of my background.
Now you even told me in some messages that you even got into, if I understood you correctly, that you got so heavily into astronomy and astrology that you would do like readings and stuff for people, and people would pay you. Yeah. So that was. When did that happen?
So that happened in early 2018. No, sorry, late 2017. It goes hand in hand with kind of the ET experience, which is really interesting. So I was very unhappy in my marriage. I wasn't connected to God. I we just couldn't work out our relationship. I felt really stuck. And I essentially quit a job to start an herbal company that was like on a whim. And I made like a lot of changes in my life, trying to find happiness, like, like follow your heart, follow your passion. And I remember I went for a walk in the woods, and I prayed, but I don't know who I was praying to, because I wasn't connected to God at that time. And I just was like, please give me like the magic back in my life. Like, I just feel so dull and empty, and like please show me like that there's magic and like whatever. And very quickly after that plea to God knows what, I just started having like very mystical things happen again. Like, I remember I went outside to look at the moon. There was like a bunch of super moons in a row where the moon was like huge. And I went outside by myself and looked, and all of a sudden I felt this rush of, I don't know how to explain it, but like energy traveling down. I was looking up at a mountain. The moon was like behind the mountain. And like just traveling, like coming faster and faster and faster. And I felt like this energy was going to engulf me. And I had a moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to let this energy engulf me. And then last minute, I was like, nope. And I just ran to the house, shut the door. I remember that was like one of my first experiences, like opening up.
I changed my mind.
And I was like, wow. And just like slowly everything started just getting more glittery and more colorful. And I had, like, when I went for a walk in the woods, like I sensed like other beings, I guess. And I was like, what's going on? I almost felt like I was on mushrooms or something, and I wasn't. I did dabble when I was younger, so I know what it feels like. Yeah, everything was really magical. And it just slowly ramped up. And then how did this all work? Oh yeah, so in February of 2018, I was sleeping. I was still married, and I was sleeping next to my husband, and we had a skylight above the bed. But I was out, and I woke up because I heard a man's voice say, "Look out the window," in like a deep like voice. And I woke up, and that was like echoing in my head. And I looked up out of the skylight, and I saw, a star. But I saw stars through the skylight every night. And I was very afraid to get out of my bed to look out the actual window. And so I didn't. And I kind of just brushed it off. And then the next night, I woke up again around the same time. I didn't hear that voice again. But I looked up through the skylight, and the star was moving. And I was like, is that my eyes? Like, what's going on? And I finally like built up the courage to get up. And I went and looked out another window in the house, and you could see that it was moving. It was an orb, which I had never seen before. And I was just in awe. And the feeling I got while looking at it I wasn't scared. I was just like in awe. And it was exhilarating. Like it was so exciting. And this happened every night for a month. One would come, two would come, three would come. And I'm bringing it back to the astrology question. So when this was happening in the beginning, I was telling my business partner, who was very into esoteric things, extremely into them. She's like, you should go get your astrology chart read. And I was like, what do you mean? And she explained to me that it's so much more than your sun sign. And there happened to be a woman like one town over who was an astrology expert, and I went and got my chart read with her, and I explained what was happening to me, like that every night I was getting visited by these orbs. I wasn't embarrassed because she was super eccentric. So I knew she could handle it. And she was like, oh, you're a starseed. Have you heard of this?
I've heard mention of it, but I've not really like looked deep into it. It's like basically from a Christian perspective, just bluntly saying it's like the Nephilim, Nephilim blood.
Well, yeah. So I've just learned about that in the past year. So essentially, if you're in the New Age world, a starseed is someone that has like a big chunk of their DNA is alien, right? So you could be from the Pleiades or Sirius or what's it called? The Lyra star system. Like there's these innate descriptions of all these beings. And she did my chart and she's like, see, you're clearly a starseed. And like, I'm a starseed. You know, like you feel special, and
everybody wants to feel special and important, and
100%. But there's weird, confusing things because I think there's truth to it, but I can't like pick it out. Do you know what so I'll give you an example. She sent me to her psychic friend. So I don't know, maybe she talked to her before I got there, but I don't think so. It was a Zoom call, and I didn't tell her anything about my personal life or my children or anything. And I'm not going to go into detail on this, but I had a dream when I was pregnant with my first child, and it was that man's voice, like the same one. And it was like, his name will be, and I'm going to make up a name because I don't want to put it on here, Lyra. And I was like, what's Lyra? Lyra. I woke up and I told my husband, I'm like, we're naming him Lyra. And he's like, no, we're not. And I was like, okay. So I negotiated to make it his middle name, but I looked up like different spellings of this word. And I came up with this one story that the Lyrians were the first humanoid travelers in the galaxy to settle on Earth. And this was like, in 2010 or something like that. Sorry, I'm making up lies now because I don't want to talk about my children on air. But the story is what matters. So I ended up spelling it the way that's talking about that first humanoid race. And I was not into anything sci-fi, anything, right? This is a long time ago. And so then I go to the psychic, right, who specializes in starseeds. And she took one look at me and she's like, you're from Lyra and your children are from Lyra. And I'm like what? Like, what is you like? This is like, 10 years later. And so there's all these things that like build up that like really they made me believe that all of this was really real. And then I got sucked into the whole story which is very similar to Jesus' second coming, or, God creating the new earth, essentially. There's a lot of references to the new earth in this 5D movement, and that the earth was going to bifurcate, meaning like split into two, and the people who couldn't raise their vibration would stay on this like very heavy, evil earth, and the people that were able to raise their vibration would move into this like new 5D earth. Like, people still believe this now, and I believed it then. And it's connected to the whole alien.
It sounds like the book of Revelation. If you put a Christian lens on it, when the new kingdom, new heaven comes down, the ungodly are outside the gates,
Right. No, it's so interesting, right? Because it's like the truth with a twist, and
that's how it always is.
Right. And the twist is, in this case, is leaving out Jesus from the story. So I got heavily into this. And then, in addition to this, when this woman read my chart, it was like another language that I knew. Like, some people will look at an astrology chart and be like, what? Like, not get it at all. It was like something clicked in my head. And I was like, I just like instantly got it, and I couldn't get enough of it. And I just devoured it. And there's really, I actually ended up studying ancient astrology, which is like, it comes from Greece, and you could study Vedic astrology, which is not Western, and I didn't relate with that at all, but I studied the Greek astrology, and it's crazy how accurate it is. Like people did pay me to do their charts. I didn't start charging for a year or so after, but the things I could know about people's lives or their character or whatever, like it's real. And I even feel like God used it to call me back, which is part of this too, if we get there. And when I got called back, I threw out my tarot cards right away. That's another thing I was into, right? Mm-hmm. I guess God called me back so powerfully. I fell to my knees and just started crying. And like, I didn't hear him audibly, but I heard him in my head. And it was, he forgave me. And it was the most loving, fatherly, safe, like vast feeling that I ever felt in my life. I felt it when I was younger, because I did have a connection to God when I was younger. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I instantly knew like all the things I was dabbling in, and I understood why he didn't want me dabbling in it. It wasn't because he didn't want me to have fun or to have the knowledge or experience magic or any of that. It was because I was opening myself up to these entities that didn't necessarily want the best things for me. And one of the first things that he spoke to me about was tarot. And he was like, who's giving you those answers? And I was like, my higher self. So like, as I was saying it, I was like, I am myself. Who's my higher self? Like, it makes sense when you're in it. But then, and he just showed me, he essentially was like, listen, there's beings that don't want the best for you and would love more than anything to be embodied. And I was like, oh my God. And I instantly got rid of them. And I asked about astrology, and I still feel this way to this day. It's not meant for self-study and self-obsession and predicting our own individual futures. It's meant for us to read signs from the heavens, from God, and
it's God's message board.
Yes. And there's a fine line, right? Because like with knowledge, you can twist it for not what it's not meant to be used for. So that came to me really clearly. So
one thing I did want to ask before you go on, the voice.
Mm-hmm.
You said you was laying in bed and you heard it, just audibly, look up.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you said? Look up, or
look out the window?
Look out the window.
Mm-hmm.
When you heard that, was it a familiar voice? Was it a scary voice, a comforting voice? I mean, did it invoke any kind of emotion from you when you heard that voice? And the reason why I ask is a lot of people I've talked to, that seems to be a common theme before a sighting. We'll just say a sighting. I've heard you say it. I've heard several other people on different podcasts and given their testimonies. And Gary Stearman,
I heard that.
He said he was flying, and then he kept hearing, look out the window, look out the window. Mm-hmm. And he finally did, and he seen a saucer or something, flying outside of the window of his plane. And then another guy, he's a local guy, I talked to him, he said it was the craziest summer of his life. I want to say it was 2014, but he said he never had any kind of supernatural experiences. He said, but that summer, he was sitting in his living room, and he said, I heard a voice plain as day. Go out to the hot tub. He said, and I was like, no, I'm watching TV. I don't want to go out there. And he said, and I heard it again. He said, and finally, he said, I just said, all right, fine. He said, I went out there and sat in the hot tub. He said, I'm sitting there for a few minutes. He said, and I heard it again. Look up. Look up. He said, and I did. He said, and I just seen this light. He said, get brighter and close.
And I saw a star, and it got really bright and dim and bright and dim. It did it 4 times, and on the 4th time it got bright, it just took off.
Open and close. He said, like pulsate. He said, and then finally it just shoo, and was gone.
Mm-hmm.
He said, then he said he started seeing, having Bigfoot experiences, had other UFO and orb experiences in the sky. And he said, and everything ended the same way it began. He said, I was out in my hot tub. He said, and I heard that voice again. Look up. He said, I was like, oh, shit. He said, I looked up. He said, and I saw that same pulsating light. He said, and then all the crazy experiences that I was having stopped. So I just, I wanted to ask you, what was your interpretation of the voice and how did it make you feel? Because that's something you hear often.
Well, so I heard, that's the thing is, it was neutral, but it had like authority. It was, and it's like very matter of fact when it happens. Like it's almost like you have to feel like that's not normal to hear someone give you orders that you don't know and you can't see. And it's interesting for me that happened twice in my life. It was the same voice when I was pregnant with my first kid telling me what to name him. So it's so confusing, right? Like we have all this information, all these similar experiences, and I have no idea. Yeah. So it was neutral. If that answers your question.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess, back to that February of 2018, because that was probably the wildest ride. I was getting into astrology. I had this esoteric astrologer who actually became my teacher. I started really studying astrology with her, and she held a lot of ceremonies. In hindsight, I don't know who the ceremonies were to, right? Maybe the ETs, maybe the goddesses. I got into goddess worship too, which it's so crazy talking about this. I'm so ashamed of all the things I got sucked into that just felt like so empowering and normal in a way. So I'll get to like the orbs and the ETs and everything, but one thing that I find really interesting that I still don't have answers to is one day she told me that one of her astrology clients had almost the same exact birth chart as me. And she's like, that's, I've been doing astrology for decades and it's unheard of that someone, I've never seen that. And he lived in the same town. And I was like, oh, weird. And she told me his name, and I had never met him. And I was like, oh, weird. And I kind of filed it in the back of my head. And we went out for tea at a local coffee shop after, because her internet went out or something. And we were finishing up some work we were doing online. And all of a sudden the door opens to this coffee shop. And I can't explain it other than like, time kind of slowed a little bit and everything in the room started getting wobbly. And I look up and there's this man standing there and he's like my age and I'd never seen him before. And we like locked eyes and the whole room's like, womp, womp. And she stood up and she's like, I'll leave you two to it. And I'm like, what? And then I realized he was the guy with the same chart as me. And supposedly he didn't really know why he was there. She didn't call him there, and so somehow I felt obligated to talk to him. It was very awkward. She laughed, things kind of got normal again. And he asked me for my number because he was getting into astrology and he wanted me to read his chart. And I told him, I'm like, I'm married. Because I felt like it was like he was, hitting on me, and he wasn't. And he's like, oh, no, that's fine. He's like, I'm really into astrology. I'm like, okay. So we texted for a couple of days about astrology. And by the way, the orbs are visiting me during this time, but I literally only told my business partner and my astrologer and my husband. Okay, so a couple of days later, I live in a pretty rural area. I decided to go shovel mulch at a free mulch pile in the middle of nowhere. Like, you only know about it if you've lived in the area. And
it's a secret mulch hole. Everybody's got one.
Right. And I was shoveling, and all of a sudden a truck pulled up, and I just looked up and smiled, and it was him. And he was like, we were both like, oh, weird. So we shoveled mulch and talked, and like in my head, I'm like, okay, this is, this is a sign. Like,
is this guy stalking me? Has he got like a GPS tracker or something on my car?
Yeah, and there's no service around where we live, so it's not even, there's nothing like that. Then another time we ran into each other, so I can't remember. It was 2 times after we ran into each other in very weird places. I lived there for a long time, never met him before. And finally we're like, let's meet up on purpose and go for a hike. So we started like as friends going for like occasionally a walk or a hike or whatever. And so one day the astrologer sat me down, and she's like, I had this vision that I need to tell you about. So she made me sit under like a copper, this is so embarrassing that
copper pyramid.
Yes, with like a crystal thing on top to tell me all this stuff. And she's like,
a Merkaba.
Well, I heard the orbs are referred to as Merkabas too.
No, it's a chariot. It's a Hebrew word for chariot. But
right.
I know, like a lot of the New Agers, that they make that and they meditate inside of it. And some people referred to that as a Merkaba. That's the
interesting.
The machine that they're they can soul travel in or whatever.
Oh, maybe they're
astral project.
Body. Oh my God, I can't believe I was in. Anyway, so I was in there, and she did a meditation thing, and then she was like, I saw you and this man together, and like, he became like the stepfather of your children, and like you guys were healing the world, like all this crazy imagery. And I'm just like, I really like this person, this man, but it was very friend vibe. Like, and it there was like a huge magnetic vibe, like, or attraction to get us to come together, but it wasn't like, it
wasn't physical.
No, I wasn't, it was just so confusing, like the whole thing. Right. And I was kind of like, oh, weird. And I had been thinking about ending my relationship, but I think because my ex and I were working through some pretty hard stuff. But I think that her vision and that whole thing, like, ultimately made me leave my husband. And
give you confirmation.
Yeah, it was a confirmation, but like, so this man is a big part of the whole ET thing, which I'll come back to that. So I was talking about the orbs that would come visit, and it was like the one you were just describing of your friend. They would pulsate, like they would get really tight and darker, and then like expand and become brighter. And from far away, they were at like a neon blue would be the main thing. But if I videotaped it and magnified the video, it was a rainbow. And like we said, a wheel within a wheel. It almost looks like that science icon with all the loops and the atom dots on it. It wasn't just the orbs. I started having these crazy dreams where I was on a spaceship with, uniform, and I had, and I had a male counterpart that was also on the spaceship with me. He also was in the same uniform. And the last time I saw this vision, the woman that I thought was me, was really worried about something. Something went wrong. This is what we, in the New Age world, it's downloads. You just know things without understanding why you know things. And it looked like what I got from the whole situation was there's a version of me in this 3D Earth world, and there's a version of me in this 5D ET world, and we're the same, but we're just in different dimensions. And it seemed so normal then, and everyone in this world talks about stuff like this. It's called soul breeding in the esoteric world. And my male partner wasn't supposed to come down, but something happened. It seemed like I messed something up. And he was like, well, now I'm going to have to come down. And I woke up, and this was like the end of me seeing the aliens and having the whole ET thing. I think it was one of my last vivid dreams. And this is where I jumped all over the place, but I was really upset because I knew they weren't going to come back. And I feel like I lost my chance of seeing what they were all about because I never actually let that energy engulf me when they came down and got close enough. I ended up doing big prayers around my house. I don't know about if you've ever had a personal where you've been further away from God. I've never totally left God, but whenever I get scared, like shit, sorry, I don't know if I can curse on this.
Yeah.
I always believe in God. Like when I'm scared, it's just so I know I never stop believing because it's just there. Like who do I go to first? And when I was so scared when the ETs were around and visiting all the time, I said prayers in my house. I walked around my house. I was like, you are not allowed in here unless you were sent by God. And it worked. Like they stopped coming in the house. But anyway, I knew it was going to be the last time and they were not going to come back. They told me that. And I was crying and I was like, if like this meant anything, I know I'm not going to know what it was about. Please give me a sign. And the sky flashed a neon blue. And I was like, okay, I'm not insane. The next day I had coffee with this guy and he looked like a little disheveled and I was like, what's wrong? And he again, I never told him anything that was happening as far as the ETs went. And he was like, the weirdest thing happened. I was looking out the window last night. Like, and out of the woods came this like neon blue flash. And he's like, and then I felt a rush of energy come at me while I was just staring out the window. And my head got scrambled. And he was like embarrassed telling me about it because he didn't quite understand. And he's like, I can't explain it. I feel really weird today. And my head still feels like scrambled. He kept saying that. And and he was doing the ceremonies and stuff with me too. So I feel like maybe he was open to whatever was happening. But it was like right after I had that dream of my male counterpart soul breeding. So I never told him to this day. And he essentially we just stopped talking. We just like kind of fell off the face of the earth. He's real. He exists. The blurry guys asked me. I know he's got married. I know they live in the next town over, but it's like our paths never crossed again. It's really weird. So
I was going to let you finish your story, but I was about to ask, did he just suddenly disappear and you never seen him again? Like he was like a Nordic or something?
No, he's still around. He has like a business. I like part of me was like, why didn't you like ask his side of the story or if anything happened? Like he could have had this happen, I don't even know. It's not something you just bring up in normal conversation until you hear a million podcasts of other people having the same experience. So,
yeah. And L.A. Marzulli, he's got all those films that he done, just specifically looking into the UFO phenomenon and got that testimony of Karen Wilkinson
I haven't heard it.
I'm not sure if you need to check that out. I've had her on the show too, but she's had UFO experiences since she was like 6 years old, and she would actually get abducted. And she said, and she would describe how they would take her, and she would just be in rooms with other kids her age and stuff like that, and how she got assigned like an overseer, I guess is what you'd call it, but he was there throughout her life, and he would appear and talk to her, and when she would get abducted, he would come in and talk to her, and basically grooming her, and said that basically once she got of age, he raped her.
Oh my God.
And that she ended up becoming pregnant, went to the doctor, was confirmed pregnant, and when she went for like the next checkup or whatever, there was no heartbeat. The red blood cell count had dissipated, or the white blood cell count had dissipated, and they were like, it's like you were never even pregnant. Are you sure that you were pregnant? And all this stuff. That happened to her, I think, 3 times.
Wow.
And then one night in her sleep, she believes those children came to her. And that, basically like a hybrid breeding program, like they took them and put them in a incubator and grew them.
Yeah.
And she said, once I prayed in the name of Jesus, she said they left. But she said that it was just like the black-eyed children, how people describe.
Yeah. That's great. I thank God that it never got that far. I don't know. Like, can you imagine? Because people don't believe these things. Like, and imagine something that traumatic happening. There's a woman in Vermont, a few towns over. I don't know her, but people told me her story. It's very similar to that. And I don't know, how old is this woman that this happened to?
She's probably early to mid 50s.
So I had this weird feeling. I've heard the one that was in Vermont, and then other people, like of a certain, like they're all over 50, I would say. Like, and then anyone under 50 don't have, at least all my people I know that have had ET experiences, don't have that as traumatic. I don't know. It's really interesting. And one of the questions I have is there, the big hypothesis is that they're fallen angels, right? But are there regular angels in the mix too? Or I don't know if there's any biblical reference. I mean, obviously we know good angels have interacted with us, right? And so I was so sure the orbs that were visiting me, and then the dreams I had, it felt good. It felt like really good. I actually was in a ball crying the last time they came. I had really clear visions that they were like parent figures, like a mom and dad, and then a male figure that was my age. Like I could see them, like in my, not physically, but like in my mind's eye. And they were like pleading with me to come outside. And all I felt was love for them. But there was something in me that was so terrified that would not let me go meet them. Like in hindsight, I did all that praying over my house. And I feel like if they were of God or benevolent, my prayers wouldn't have stopped them. Well, obviously, if they were of God, nothing would have stopped them from entering my house. But they like adhered to the barrier, and I kind of feel like they. I don't think the longer I sit with it, I don't think it would have been a good experience if I went with them.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that something held me back. But there's something.
And this is something too that's just, we don't have to just take your word for neither, because you've shown me lots of pictures and video interaction with these orbs.
Right. Yeah. I did have an iPhone, but it's, I could email you them too if you ever want to pick them up. But I find it interesting, right? Because people are experiencing more orbs. intermixed with the drones, like we talked about.
Yeah. And the wheels within wheels, because it's like, you got all this stuff happening right now in New Jersey. And like you said, I think it's hard to tell because it's like you have a smorgasbord of stuff in the sky. You have orbs, you have drones, you have these things that when you zoom in, it looks like wheels within wheels with eyes round about, just like in Ezekiel. And the angels in the Bible, you can't tell them apart from humans.
Right.
That they walk up and sit down and have dinner with Abraham. They eat, they drink, and they're obviously beautiful. They go into the city of Sodom, and the people want to have sex with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Bible tells you to be nice and kind to strangers because you could be entertaining angels unaware.
Right.
And then you hear all the stories about the Nordics and all these different types of UFO and alien entities. And
right.
I mean, if you take a textbook definition, God, angels, demons, Satan, all of these things are not of this world. So on a technicality, you could easily just slap that right in there under extraterrestrial. So
right.
Who's to say if these things ain't using some type of vehicle and conveying around, and what we're seeing is them mixed in also. I mean,
right. Well, I do the orb. So back to, just because you brought up Merkaba before, when I was experiencing those orbs, and then there was also like an entity connected to the orb, I was told through downloads. Sounds so silly to say, but I was not into any of this sci-fi stuff. So it's not like I've been reading and it got in my head. It just, all of a sudden I knew these things. It felt to me like the orbs were a safe way for physical beings to travel. Like that they were in bigger ships in physical bodies, but they had the technology, they were able to come out in these orbs that look like not solid, but almost like they could be some kind of plasma thing.
Yeah, like a jelly ball.
Yeah. And like where their essence is in it, but like their physical body isn't in it. That's what it felt like to me. And I even feel like I saw, and like I'm questioning because it's been so long and it was so crazy at the time, but I felt like I saw like an actual ship like in the clouds, like kind of cloaked, and that these things were like flying out of. That was only like once in like, the many, many times I saw them. But yeah, I also, one piece of the New Age ET story too was that there was in the past, there was a galactic war, and that, I don't know if you've heard this, but that's why supposedly the Pleiadians were involved with it, and they call the people of Lyra the Lyrians. And at one point, there was a galactic war of like some kind of evil group. I forget what they're called. Probably like it's been so long now, the reptilians, their whole thing. But supposedly there was all the mixed races of aliens living peacefully on Sirius for a long time until this galactic war happened. That's why there's such a mix of beings here on Earth with all different alien DNA and blah, blah, blah. It's like a very intricate story that people that live in that world believe very clearly. And since I've been, reading the Bible with new eyes, we don't know if God, if there was a separate existence before our existence. I don't think, but I'm not a Bible expert by any means, so I hope no one comes at me.
Well, a lot of people toss around, the gap theory.
I haven't heard that.
But I talked to Ryan Peterson on the show, and we talked about it, and a lot of people believe that there's a huge gap in time between Genesis 1:1 and verse 2, because in there it says, when you look into the Hebrew, it says that, the earth was, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it was null and void. And then it says that he hovered over the face of the deep and all that stuff. Well, when you go into the Hebrew, that was the the void without form is to tohu bahohu. And I probably butchered that. I'm Southern man. I can barely speak English, so be easy on me, guys. But it's something like that, to tohu babohu. And when you go into the book of Isaiah, it says in there that the Lord creates nothing to tohu babohu. He creates nothing null and void, that he makes everything perfect. So a lot of people say that they think that he created the earth and it was perfect. But then, there's this huge gap. It could be thousands of years. And that could explain the age of the earth being as old as it is. And that there was a rebellion or a turning over of the angelic race, or maybe a pre-Adamic race, and God destroyed it and hit the reset button. And that's where verse 2 picks up, because it's now been made null and void from a galactic war or judgment, and he recreated and reconstituted everything.
Wow. That's a very interesting theory.
Yeah. And like you were saying, all those correlations too that I see with the LDS Church. I've been speaking with a couple people that have come out of Mormonism, and I've never really looked into their faith. It's a lot like Scientology. Yeah. According to them, and it sounds so much like what you guys are saying, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, with a lot of this stuff, you do get truths. But it's some of it's been perverted and twisted, and it's usually the most important parts that's been twisted and perverted. But in their faith, they say that they are basically star children. They might not use that exact kind of phrase and verbiage, but they say that out there in outer space, there's God Elohim, and he's got his heavenly council and all of his children, and he sends their spirits to earth. And there he is having constant sex with all kinds of divine women in outer space and creating star children. And there's thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of these souls of little babies that he's having sex and creating, but they don't have bodies. So his children that are on Earth, it's basically like a prison planet. And when you get married and you join the church, all the babies that you create, they are lifeless bodies for their vessels, for these spirit babies that God has created to enter. And that there was a divine rebellion, and Lucifer was thrown down. But the ones that didn't choose a side, that tried to just stay neutral, didn't choose a side, as a curse, their skin was burnt. So that explains why you have black people, brown people, and all that stuff, because they didn't choose a side, and they were cursed. So it's wild. And to get back to heaven, well, if you do everything you're supposed to do here on this prison planet, you become an Elohim. You become a god, and you're given your own planet. And you and your wife and your children are the gods and rulers of this planet, and you start another, basically Earth, and you're the god of that place and see over it.
Oh God! Wow! And
this is all been given supposedly to Joseph Smith, and an angel, an entity, appeared to him and give him a download and told him all this stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yes, I have heard some of this, but not to that detail. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. All these other religions or ways to look at life. It's either you believe in God, the creator, or you believe that we are gods, or we have the ability to become a god. And like that to me, the New Age is very focused on that we are all little gods, and gods create, which is, even I have I have Christian friends who have come from the New Age that still, like, will refer to us as little G gods and little G goddesses.
Yeah, they're more Gnostic Christians.
Yeah. And I'm just like, no, we are divine because we were made. God made us, and we're special, and we're beloved, but we are not gods. And that's where I think, that it gets like twisted, and
that's the first lie Satan told in the garden too. That's something maybe you can bring up to them when they bring that up and be like, well, isn't that the first thing Satan told Adam and Eve?
Right.
Ye shall be as gods.
Right.
That's the number one lie and trick, and that's what started all this crap.
Right. 100%. And that's why I struggle too with, I have such a quest or a thirst for knowledge, and I'm like, what? I think we're not meant to know everything. And so that's like a big struggle I have now. It's like, what am I meant to know, God, and what am I not meant to know? But one thing I find very interesting is so many New Agers are becoming Christian. And it's just continuing to happen. It's the norm now, in my world, at least. I will just, if I have a one-on-one conversation with someone, women friends from the New Age world, they are so interested in why I love Jesus so much. And because they saw my journey in the New Age. And so I've had the experience with my women friends just really opening up to it and asking a million questions. Like every day I'm getting texts like, well, what about this? And what about this? And I'm not an expert. So I was like praying to God to give me wisdom, but that's huge. But then also I've seen so many women that I follow on social media, or that I actually am friends with, that live across the country, that I'll touch base with. And then, they'll just be like, oh, by the way, I'm Christian. I'm like, I am too. It's wild. I just, and as the times are getting crazier and more people are seeing ETs, orbs, like those demon faces, you've heard of that, right? Where they're trying to normalize that there's a new disorder that people see demon faces. Google that one, people. The world's getting more and more wild, and more people are turning to Christ. It's a wild time to be alive.
Yeah, it is. And, was really into, astrology and astronomy and stuff like that. And that's something that you do see in the Bible. But like you talked about earlier, it's that line, to know, where to stop at. And the great deceiver likes to twist it and blur that line and pull you past it and make you fall off the edge. Because, it says, and, he hung the moon, stars, and all that in the firmament for signs and for seasons. You're supposed to look up and look to these things, but it's kind of like Paul said, we made the mistake and we traded the truth for a lie, and we worshiped the created things instead of the creator.
Right.
And I think the same thing with crystals and stones and herbs. All these things are things that God created, and I think he created us to use them.
100%.
And even with the stones, you got the 12 stones in the ephod and the Urim and Thummim, and God gives commandments on how to use them. It's just, they got perverted, and it's just, it's all about the heart and what your intentions are, and not worshiping these useful tools that God gave us to use for our benefit, and put the power in those created things instead of him.
Right. And giving thanks to God for the herbs that, help us with our coughs or whatever ailments we have, like 100%.
Do you think there's a ruler or principality? Because how Paul talks about, we battle not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, principalities, and spiritual wickedness in high places. And I really am fascinated with the whole Deuteronomy 32 worldview.
I am too.
Not only were the tongues divided, but mankind was divided amongst the sons of God. And you get into Psalms 82, that's the judgment to those guys. It said, how long will you rule unjustly? showing partiality to the wicked. You desire to live the eternal life, but you shall fall and die like any prince. And you see them in Daniel. And that explains a lot of the evil in the world today, because a lot of non-believers will use, all the wicked and unjust things going on today and say, well, your God's not real, or he's just a real shitty God, because look at all of this stuff going on. It's like, no, you're lacking the Deuteronomy 32 worldview here. Right. There's fallen sons of God ruling over the nation still.
Right.
But when I looked at astrology, and astronomy, it's like you are putting yourself under the dominion of these, what the Greeks called gods. The stars were gods.
Well, and
like you're yoking yourself to them.
100%. And that's, the last real astrology talk I had with somebody, the woman was saying how she was living in a Saturn year. She practiced Vedic astrology, which is different. It's from India, and it goes a lot with all the gods and goddesses that they have. But she was saying she was in a Saturn year, and Saturn's in astrology very restrictive and puts up barriers, etc. And she's like, and so I can't take advantage of. She was excited about this opportunity, but she was telling me she couldn't take advantage of it because she was in a Saturn year. And I was just like, I'm like, wow, you are just giving your power away to this entity. And I really believe the planets have entities associated with them. I don't know if it's just one. I think they are principalities. I think at one point God had them in charge, and they're still in charge, but they, have fallen as well. And I think, I'm still diving into the Bible, all those things that you said, I've read, but I haven't, it's still so much information for me right now. And it's very affirming, but in astrology too, there's planets rule over different areas of the world where you live. Mm-hmm. There's a whole type of astrology that's related to that. And I still have a lot of astrology knowledge in my head, even though I don't practice it and I don't look it up all the time now. And I just pray to God. I'm like, you are greater than, those entities that are here now. So I know that if you want something to happen, may your will be done and not their will. I really believe that they're real. Just because hundreds and hundreds of charts in my own life too, it's really interesting. I think this world is so much more supernatural than we can even imagine.
Yeah. And that's the thing, Lindsay. I mean, you got a gift, you got that knowledge base, and you have a different set of glasses that most people don't have. Mm-hmm. So I'm honestly excited to consider you a friend and have you in my circle, because when you're going to be diving through that Bible and going through this stuff, you're going to be seeing it with a new set of eyes, a set of eyes that I don't have, and a knowledge base that I don't have. So I'm excited to see what you find, because I'm no expert, at anything, but especially the astrology and the astronomy side of it. But I've seen all kinds of stuff like that in there. And it talks about, Jesus saying, I will be with you until the end of the age. An age, that's, 2,600 years. Mm-hmm. And it's like you have all this symbology of the ram during the time of Moses. Mm-hmm. And then you move into Pisces. Jesus, his birth brought in the age of Pisces. Right. And then we are now coming to the end of Pisces, and the next one after that is Aquarius. And the book of Revelation tells us, in the end of days, I will pour out my flesh, or pour out my spirit upon all flesh. And what does it say? Knowledge will increase. The old men will have dreams, and the young men will prophesy. And like you said earlier, we're living in an extraordinary time.
Right.
Knowledge is definitely increasing. People are starting to prophesy and have dreams. Mm-hmm. The skies are lighting up with orbs and entities, and getting more cryptid sightings. I mean, I know every generation since the time Jesus left has said, the end is near, the end is near. But we're definitely closer than we was, yesterday.
100%. My mother was raised Jehovah's Witness, and so she became Christian when I was a toddler. So I don't remember it, but she tells me stories from her childhood, and I've been very wary my whole life of thinking that the end is near because of how she had so much trauma from it ending almost every day, right? And also only a certain amount of people can get into heaven. It's not, but when I got called back to God, and I had that very strong conversation with him, I didn't have any Bibles in my house anymore. I had gotten rid of all of that. And that happened to me a few days before I went to go visit my family. I have a very large family in New York. And I got invited very last minute to stay with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt, when I got there, was like, I invited you last minute because I didn't feel comfortable with you coming because of all your pagan tendencies. She's super Christian. And I was like, oh, this is so funny. And I just started crying, and I was like, this is so crazy that I'm staying with you. And she went and got me, I told her that I was, that I came back, and she went and got me a Bible, and it was, a really emotional moment. And I went into the bedroom and I said goodnight that night, and having my tarot tendencies, I was like, God, this is the first time I'm opening a Bible and I don't know how long. Show me the verse I need to know, right? And I'm like, la, I need to stop doing that. But I opened up to Revelations 12. I'm an astrologer. I could not believe it. And I opened it up and I read it, and I was like, oh my God, this is so full of symbolism. To me, it was clearly around a new moon in Virgo, and it took me a long time to realize that the crown was referring to Israel, and just, I'm going to butcher it again because I'm not an expert. But I was going crazy, just why would God show me that? Why would I open to Revelations? Out of all the, crazy, wild things that happen, and that Christians don't even agree on what it means, and
and it's beautiful because that's the birth of Jesus. That's the sign in the heavens, I believe, that was the birth of Jesus. And who's the ones that seen it?
Right.
The Magi, the astrologers, man.
Right.
And you turned to that.
Right, I did. I turned to that, and to me, it felt like it was talking about his second coming, and which I know in the Bible, everything has more than one meaning. I think. And there's a spiritual and the physical, and then the metaphorical, and, things happen more than once, but I was very confused, and I just I'm like, I can't obsess about this. I decided to put it away. And then the next week after I came home from the family trip, my friend who was a new Christian, who, before I became a Christian, I noticed her before I came back to being a Christian. I was like, oh, it's so interesting that she's a Christian. And I kind of kept her a little bit at bay because I thought she'd judge me in my ways, She randomly comes into my shop for the first time, since I've been open. And she's like, Lindsay, she's like, you're an astrologer. What do you think about Revelations 12 and what's happening in the sky right now? And I'm like, what are the chances, right?
Yeah. What was that, 2016 or 18 when we had that conjunction come back again?
So that was, so first of all, this was last year, early September 2023. And the first one that everyone was really excited about was all the planets were converging on the crown, and it looked, Jupiter was between the legs of the Virgin, So
they called it a supernova, the three together or something.
Yeah, I can't remember because I like kind of discredited that. But the one that happened last year, it wasn't in the constellation Virgo, but visually, the child asteroid was between the legs of the Virgin right when I was like talking to my friend about that, reading about that. There was literally an asteroid named Child. Yeah. And so I was like, what? And then I went down this huge rabbit hole, and I'm like, okay, I'm so not a biblical expert, but I was like, there's 3 people in my life that are Christian and understand astrology, which I think it's really hard to find the two because most Christians won't even dabble in that.
Yeah. That's the devil.
Right.
That's the devil.
and I, I think there's a lot of truth to that. But then on the other side, astrologers like think Christians are crazy, because they won't, whatever. So I was like, if Revelations is real and it's like a real roadmap, like I feel like the next step is like soon, like very soon, like within the next few weeks, something really big will happen in Israel. And then forgot about that. And then October 9th happened. And then I was like, okay, maybe that was like a fluke. Like that's huge, right? That happened. And then I was like, well, again, I'm not good at deciphering all this Bible stuff and all this symbology. I was like, but one thing, this will never happen. If like Russia and Syria get involved, then it's definitely literal. And then like, you know what I mean? Like I keep going down the steps and then I like second guess myself. I without all that revelation stuff and like it correlating to real world events today and us being poised for the first time in human history as we know it. I feel like a lot of stuff we've learned isn't true when they've erased a lot of truth, but like as we know it, it's the first time ever that there could be a one world government, right? Where we could be under mass surveillance. Like people are excited about like Elon Musk giving us free internet. Like that's terrifying. We're going to like constantly be connected no matter where you are in the world. Like how, I don't know. But besides all that, like my gut just, and all the people being called back like overnight to Christ, it just feels like something's imminent. And on top of that, I don't know if you've heard this, but there's, we're in the last jubilee of the 2000 years or whatever. Have you heard of this? Yeah.
I've heard some people, say something about this being possibly the last jubilee, and but I've not took a deep dive on it.
So I think I don't remember the words, but there's 2,000 year chunks, right, in the Bible. And so we're in the last jubilee of the 2000 chunk. And Jesus supposedly came back during the last jubilee of the previous 2,000 year chunk. And so a lot of people are, talking. I'm sure Christians have been talking about this forever, and this is all new to me and like exciting, and I'm just like jumping in. I'm like, here's my opinion. When people have been like arguing forever about like when Jesus is coming back, but it feels like it's soon. And I also, one thing that keeps popping out to me is how many Christians are going to be fooled when the Antichrist comes. And it's just like in my head. And I just don't feel like we should give all our hope into any man that exists on earth today. But
and that's one thing. I did an episode with some guys, and I've lightly looked into the UFO phenomena and stuff, but they wanted to talk about the drones over New Jersey, and what, we thought about it. And they knew that I was a Christian and I'd come at it with a Christian lens. So they just asked me to come on the show for that different, perspective. So I just kind of did some light reading and looked into Project Bluebeam. And I've always heard people talk about it, but I never really looked into it. And that was the first time I looked into it. And the only thing I knew was the government's going to do a fake light show and trick everybody into thinking it's aliens, but it's really not. That was just kind of my interpretation or understanding of it. But when I looked it up, it was like this really ornate 4-stage process. And it says that first, NASA's going to make an earthquake or some kind of catastrophe. And through that catastrophe, there's going to be new archaeological finds that they supposedly plant that shakes the faith of everyone on planet Earth. And then after that, they're going to put drones or lights in the sky, but they're going to put Messiah figures of all the different world religions. And then all those different Messiahs are going to converge into one and basically tell everybody, it's me. These were just finger puppets the whole time, and I'm the real one. So everybody come to me now. And then there's going to be a huge war with aliens that come into the sky, because they're going to portray aliens like an invasion. And then through this, all the world governments are going to unite, and it's going to be a global disarmament and a one world government, a one world religion. And that was the whole plan, supposedly, of Project Bluebeam. But it sounds a whole lot like Revelation, you know.
It really does. And it seems like it's ramping up with the drones that people are conflating with orbs. Like, right? So I think there's like some real things flying around, and then our government drones, which are also, everyone's saying they're coming from the ocean now.
Yeah.
So
if I told them guys, I said, I think some of it is demonic and fallen angels. Some of it quite possibly could be good angels and good entities. I said, but then we have a third leg intertwined in all this, and that is the world government's reverse engineered technology that these fallen angels had given to them.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think, like, as new Christians or people that are overwhelmed, and I keep coming back to this too, like, the way you know is if they declare Jesus is king. Like, are you like, is Jesus king to all these religious, you know, right? It's that simple, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Lindsay, I know you got to get to those youngins and got some stuff you got to do, but is there anything that you want to say in closing? Any kind of message to the listeners, or any kind of closing statement that you'd like to make?
Well, thank you for having me on. I love your show, and it's fun to get to know you. Yeah, and I guess it's just my wish for everyone. I think your base is probably mostly Christian, but it's just that, you know, everyone feels the love and peace and acceptance, and not needing to search and dive into all these things because they found Jesus. And with everything I've experienced and been through and all the questions I have, it's like the only place I can rest. And I just wish that for everyone.
And I know you had mentioned that you're into herbalization. Do you do like tinctures and home remedies and stuff like that? And if you do, can our listeners find this online and place some orders? Can you direct the good listeners to find some of your home remedies?
I would. That's very sweet of you. Thank you. Yes, I have a website. It's thebotanicals.net. And yeah, I make everything from beauty products to tinctures and teas and salves, and I grow all my own herbs that I use as well. So thank you.
How much are your love potions?
My love.
I like the number 9.
I do.
Love potion number 9.
I'll send you a link after the show.
Yeah, that's a 90s reference for all the people out there that totally went over their head. Lindsay, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your testimony, and love to have you back. Maybe we can go through some of the astronomical stuff in the Bible and kind of get your expertise on that stuff. That'd be a fun show.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Sweet. Well, guys, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. Be sure to head on over. I'll have her link in the description for her shop. Head on over and get you some love potions and some good remedies. Non-witchy remedies.
Thanks.
But guys, thank you for tuning in. And as always, the difference between the known and the unknown is the journey. It's a good journey, guys.